everyone. This is Ben Cox with High Country 365. We publish the Journey magazine, and we've got a great website, journeync.com. And we're here today to talk, kind of augment a story that Deanna shared with us back in the summer of 2022. She was the cover story for our magazine. We do the magazine in the summer and in the winter, usually at the end of June. So this was end of June 2022, and then we do another one in November. And so she was the cover story, and I actually had a writer that said, "Hey, I got a story I'd like to share." Her name's Hannah Westergreen, and so she wrote this beautiful story. And living in Boone, you know, if you live in the High Country, you know everybody. I knew who Deanna Ballard was, but I was so impressed with the story, I decided I wanted to pursue a YouTube interview. And due to different complications we've had, we never posted it when we wanted to right after that edition. We did post Deanna's story online. We did a blog of the story, but we're aiming to do a YouTube post hopefully next week to augment that story. So the title of the article was "Oh God, Strengthen My Hands," and the subtitle was "From Mom and Dad's House to the White House to a Cabin in Boone, the Journey of a Stateswoman." So now your journey has led you to be running for lieutenant governor. And so I just want to say how, you talked about how your faith formed and led, it was following the Lord that led you into being a politician or working in politics and, serving in the House of Representatives for North Carolina?
State Senate.
State Senate. So that shows how I should have done my homework. But anyway.
Fine.
Yeah, so she actually was our state senator, and now here she is. And so tell us about what's gone on with you and what happened since that time, because I think, you lost narrowly. And I remember we had a follow-up talk. I said, "What are you going to do now?" And she goes, "Well, the Lord will lead." So tell us about it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the chance just to really touch base again and continue to share really a story of just continued faith and walking out in this calling of service and public service, I guess. And, in my regard, service can look a lot of ways. It looks different no matter what, but, we are called to do that in Scripture, to love our neighbor, to serve our neighbors. But I think, for me, the Lord continues to put a heart in my heart, just a real a calling and just sort of a meaningful push and motivation towards the public service side of it and really serving districts and our constituents across the state just really well. I believe I've demonstrated that in the past, and think I'm a good a good sort of servant for folks, and really genuinely helpful and responsive to the needs, and just aware and listening. And you may not be able to solve everything, but you're able to really have those hard conversations and just, you want to help people. And I think for me, that's just really kind of a genuine spirit of mine and a real heart. So I would say, sure, the aftermath of the last election was challenging, a little difficult. I still had to finish out my term, which I was trying to finish out well and strong for the district. And in the meantime, really just continuing to seek and think through kind of, and be prayerful about what was next. And it was great to have a little bit of downtime too in the middle of some of that earlier this year. And, doors sort of just closed and doors opened. And I would have to say that I think the Lord has just continued to draw me into that original calling of obedience to what He puts before me. And this pathway now has been towards running for lieutenant governor, which I announced at the end of July. And so really continuing just to kind of stay rooted in that original call and in that scripture of even Nehemiah that you referenced to, but also the Lord continues to use Gideon. He really has brought me continually back to Him as well. then also in the Psalms and really just encouraging me through Psalms and just, being a light in the darkness. And I think that's really, there's Psalm 18:28 that speaks to that, and Psalm 90, I think. So, I mean, he's in charge, he's sovereign. So I'm just trusting again. I mean, it's always scary when you put
Yeah,
yourself out there, and now you're
yeah,
running statewide. So it's a larger landscape that you're rather exposed to, good or bad. I mean, I'm not a perfect person by any means, but I am a forgiven child of God, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm, just grateful for his mercy as a sinner at the heart of it all. And that, I'm willing to just really be before him and allow him to use me, for his purposes and for his glory. I mean, that's ultimately, why I am and where I've been, and so I just want to continue to stay faithful in that. And I do believe probably the work I had accomplished in the Senate was, perhaps his way of, I was able to do what he had asked me to do in the critical time that it was, during the pandemic, especially. So I'm excited about, these next steps. I mean, it's a lot. It's hard. You're still, no, I'm no stranger to the highways for sure. But I mean, even like this coming weekend, I'm going to be crisscrossing the state from, Brevard, North Carolina down to Wilmington. So, I mean, these are the things that one has to do in order to really kind of get in front of folks. And you just really pray that the Lord puts the right audiences in front of you in the right time and protects you in it. I mean, he's not always, you really want God to protect you through your calling and not necessarily from it. I mean, the
yeah.
Lord called, Daniel to the lion's den and protected him through it. The same with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, so it's like the Lord is with me still. I mean, that's been the consistent promise, no matter how fearful I may be.
Right. Well, I thought it was very, very interesting when you say you announced in July of 2023, and that was almost a year after,
Oh yeah.
yeah, after we had done the first video. So, I really want the audience to understand that there was that gap, and now here you are. Um, I was curious, was there a moment, because I know you had talked to me about, I'm willing to follow the Lord and whatever the next step is. I don't know what it is. Was there a time that you just felt like it's lieutenant governor? Because, like you say, that's a lot, that's a statewide thing. And so, was there a moment that you felt like this is what it's supposed to be? And if
I
so,
believe that in June, I would say through the first quarter of the year, I think, there were several kind of opportunities before me, and I really was prayerful. I covered it all in prayer to be like, all right, Lord, close this door, or, let's, take this off the plate, of what I really need to be focused on and doing and what you want me to do. And I'd gotten at, I mean, I got asked. I mean, I got asked to consider it. And so that's, again, it goes back to even the original calling and stepping up. I was asked to consider it. And, that's definitely not something you take lightly. And then knowing the space of, Raleigh, but also, having served in the Senate, the lieutenant governor presides over the Senate and the operations. The lieutenant governor also has a seat on the State Board of Education for K-12, as well as the State Board for Community Colleges. So the fact that I had chaired education policy and appropriations, I'm very familiar with a lot of the players that are on those boards and a lot of the policy work, that can go on and that I can kind of be in front of too, and still have a hand in protecting, our classrooms, or, our workforce, and in developing the workforce. So I do think things just really sort of started to reveal itself. And the Lord just kind of kept, prompting. The Lord, when you're still before the Lord, I mean, He speaks to you and He prompts your heart in certain directions. And it's, your discernment and understanding, is this the path or is it something else? And sometimes that's just through prayer, and that's through other people praying over you and for you. Because you can't always do it alone. I mean, you need folks to intercede on your behalf as well.
that's interesting that you brought that up, because when I was contemplating us having this interview, I wondered if someone like yourself has a prayer team that's praying specifically for you, because you do need that prayer covering. I'm sure you've got great friends and family that you can say, hey, give me a prayer, pray for this, but do you have you developed a team?
So it's interesting you ask, because we have been in the process of trying to organize, get a little structure to something. I am going to be probably, putting on the website, and then I'm at different functions where I actually I have folks that can sign up to join a prayer team. And then my mom's graciously, offered to really be sort of the lead captain, so to speak, on that, and, regularly update folks like Mondays, or, once a week, or, hey, here's Deanna's challenges this week, or, hey, Deanna's traveling, or let's pray for the folks Deanna's in front of this week, because they're all dealing with different situations in their own lives. So there's no better, in my mind, there's no better person even for that than my mom, who will really speak to these individuals who want to come alongside her, and just be behind the scenes lifting me up in prayer. And, having worked at Samaritan's Purse and the Billy Graham Association, I have seen the power of prayer make a huge difference. Even when Franklin would get up to speak or preach, there's folks behind him that are praying over him as he's up there presenting the word and the gospel. And so for me, that's where I also, what an example that was to see that in action. But then also to know, like, my goodness, like, we can't just assume that, we can always do it on our own, or like, it's the same, maybe your parents, you can always count on your parents or your really close friends. But for goodness sakes, it's awesome to have folks in your community or in your church family that are just really consistently lifting you up. And it's been nice to know that even at church, I've had folks that have been praying over me as well. And so I have had these very small pockets of people that come up and have added me to, their prayer list at their weekly women's Bible study. That happened to a group when I was speaking to a group in Greensboro. So it's been a wonderful and a beautiful thing how this has organically kind of happened too. But at the same time, we want to kind of capture it and allow the Lord to multiply it. And so we want to create a little bit of a platform to do that.
Well, running for public office is not for the faint of heart. And I admire your courage. I admire your conviction. I know that it's more than just, hey, well, maybe I'll do this. I know you're following the Lord into this arena of service. And I love your servant's heart in it. And of course, we have the perfect example of a servant in how Christ led. And he's, he changed the world with his servant attitude. He said, you call me Master and Lord, and you should call me Master and Lord, but I'm going to show you how good leadership works. It works by washing people's feet. It works by serving you. So now that I've set this example, you go and serve, be that kind of servant leader. And that's, I'm so convinced that when we have that kind of a heart, not we're going to tell you something, but we're going to serve you, that's the best way to get people's hearts to soften and maybe open up and at least listen.
Right.
Because we are acutely aware of how polarized we've become. So I appreciate even how I think God has anointed you to push through the maybe resistance and just love people. And you brought that out in your last interview. So I'm so excited that we got this time. And I really want to encourage, this is just kind of to introduce the YouTube video we're going to release, because in that video, you really pick up the importance of following Christ in your calling. I just thought about your mom. I never met your mom, but I got to know your mom through what you told about your mom. And I just thought your mom and dad are stellar.
They really are.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed.
You are blessed. And you've just increased your prayer covering through this video. And I love what you're doing. May that be confirmation, because I was just praying about it and I felt like the Lord told me to ask you that question. So you're on the right track. And, having been a part of, I don't know if you remember years ago, High Country Festival 2000, where.
Yes. Yes. I've heard a lot about that. I wasn't here then, but yes.
Yeah. So my job, the thing that I did, I was a pastor in a church at the time that I mean, I had a passion for it. I said, look, I don't want to do all this other stuff. I want to be over the prayer ministry. And man, we had a tent off to the side and there were dedicated people and they were praying. And we prayed
Right?
on site with Insight before he ever came. And then, I mean, there was so much prayer laid down and it was, we were kind of listening to what was going on, but we were praying and we were praying over him while he was preaching. And,
But, and then praying over the audience and the hearts that are there that
yeah,
just will become sensitive to the Lord, and the prompting. So, that's a beautiful thing to be a part of too.
yeah. And so, Deanna, bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our
Thank you
prayers
much.
are with you, and I can't wait to get this YouTube video finally posted and for more people to get to know your heart.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to share it. And
Mhm.
again, for, the article last year and just what a blessing that was. And the timing that was too was really awesome in terms of just right after the election and kind of the loss and, still grieving a little bit out of that, but also just trusting, oh my goodness, the Lord is just so good in a lot of ways. So
I love it. Thank you so much.
thank you.
We'll let you know when it's out. God bless.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Cox. I'm with the Journey magazine and journeync.com, and I'm here with Deanna Ballard, our senator for North Carolina's 45th district. And hi, Deanna. Thanks so much for allowing us to share your story.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited. Anytime I have the opportunity to really talk about my faith and where God has been leading me, and then just giving and all the glory and honor to Him, it's a privilege.
Well, thank you so much. Just for our viewers to know, we're conducting this Zoom interview to augment a story that's already been written. It's been written with interviewing Deanna. Hannah Westergreen just did an excellent job. So I'm basing these questions on her interview. So you need to read the story and the journey, and then you'll appreciate this interview in conjunction with that. One final thing I'll say, the thing that differentiates the journey from any other high country publication that I know of is every story will have something to do with a person's their personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And we know the thing that differentiates Christianity from every other world relationship, every other world religion. It's not about religion, it's about relationships. So that came through loud and clear in your interview and that we read. And I think that with that in mind, we'll start with some questions, okay?
Sure.
All right. So talk to me about the thought processes and circumstances of 6-year-old Deanna when you took that step where the way it seemed in the interview is you were very conscious about making an intentional decision to become a follower of Christ. And then also, as you tell that story, just any other significant times, because everybody's story has that first initial time, but there's also times where all of us have had to rededicate and get back to where we were. So maybe if you could just
Sure.
speak to that whole part of your journey, the initial salvation experience, and then just whatever you want to share.
Well, I grew up in a Christian home, and I talk a bit about that in the interview and in the article. But my grandfather was a pastor, so really had been surrounded by godly examples and scripture and just the importance of prayer. My mom in particular, I remember one occasion where she's curling my hair for church in the morning and really walking through like the Roman road with me. So it's like anytime I feel like my parents or grandparents could feed into even everyday life, just really scripture moments or the importance of understanding the relationship with Jesus Christ and really asking Him and inviting Him into your heart. And really it just led to I remember going to church soon thereafter, and and consciously, you know, walking forward and going to the pastor.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for me, it was pretty, I guess, clear. Some folks in my family will always say I'm pretty decisive. So, but once I, you know, make my mind up or, you know, make a decision, I do it. I follow through with it. And, you know, of course, then that was followed through with baptism. And, you know, it's funny too, because I remember I was so young and so short. I had to stand on like a cinder block in the baptismal pool. Uh, so, you know, I mean, it was all, but I remember also just, you know, being surrounded by family, and not just my immediate blood family, but also just my church family, and just feeling really, you know, the presence of that community and being a part of, you know, and then this relationship with Jesus Christ in that community. So, gosh, and I would say there's so many times throughout your life, and even in mine in particular, where, I mean, it really is about growing in a relationship. It's about building that intimacy. So, you know, as a teenager, we were very involved in going on youth retreats and mission trips. I really, really always valued kind of those opportunities. We'd go to Vermont and put on, you know, do like a vacation Bible school for local communities up there in the middle of summer. But I've also been on just some different like rebuilding, like home type, you know, trips, and even just, I mean, different opportunities for our youth group or, you know, our children's group or whatever to go to these various, like, you know, Fort Caswell, Camp Munta Vista, I mean, South Mountain, and like really just time for us to build relationships with one another too in that church community. So I guess there's just a ton of different points and those markers along the way, but also, you know, going to college was a really big decision for me. And I mean, that took a lot of prayer. That was just a lot of conversation with my family. You know, I did the one thing my dad told me not to do, and that was to go out of state and private. So
Yeah.
I prayed about that and was like, we definitely laugh about it now. But I mean, and my dad was so supportive when he just really, because it was like affirming for them. It confirmed for them too, because it was such a big decision for me. I went to Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee.
I wonder, I
Yeah.
assumed that when you said you went to
Yeah.
Tennessee.
So I went to Belmont, and so it was 400 miles away from home. I'm the first one in my family to go to college, and I think there was a lot of weight attached to that for me. And then to be going so far away, and then, you know, the finances and just my family, we are you know, middle class family in North Carolina, and dad's a logger, mom's a school teacher, but the Lord's provided. And I mean, it was just so clear that this was where I needed to go, even though it wasn't something that was, I guess, a strong desire to, like, I was having like some hesitation about it, but it just felt like exactly the right thing to do. And so that was a real a step of obedience and faith. And it just really opened up a lot of doors from there. I mean, God just worked in it and through it. So, different, I guess there was another point in college where, I mean, he used scripture. It was about changing kind of my major and my career. And I mean, just explicitly, like through scripture, you know, just kind of made that real for me. And it was out of Philippians. And so it's just, there have been moments where it's just very stark, very clear. And then there are moments where I'm supposed to take this step of faith. And then I get the kind of affirmation after the fact, or, you know, as later on. So
Right.
I don't know.
Well, you piqued my curiosity in regards to, so you're in high school and you go against the grain of what you thought even you would do. You did that feeling like the Lord directed you to do that. And then you say you were there and you changed your major. So if you went to Belmont, it's known for music, right? Did you?
Right.
So talk to me about your major.
Sure.
what
So
you
I went
were
there.
and why you switched.
Yeah, I went there really kind of leaning into the music business program. I really kind of was interested in the business scene. behind the music industry. And so you kind of got in there, you realize going through, oh my gosh, I'm going to be pigeonholed to like Nashville, LA, or New York.
Yeah.
And, so then in my mind, I'm sitting there, I don't know if I want to be so, tethered to only those particular options in terms of industry, location. And so it was really interesting. Had been doing some internships, and so really pursued more of a business administration degree focused in hospitality, in the hospitality industry. And so kept my minor because I had so much coursework too. And I mean, there's some great copyright law, was one of the courses I loved actually, but you're all in like the publishing side of it, the management side. So, there were a lot of tools and pluses too that came out of that, but the Lord really made it clear. And it really did open up, more opportunities for me. And so I think that's proven to be, successful.
And in the story, you told it was in college that you first really became acquainted with the whole political process. In other words, it seemed to me like, as a person reading this story, that you didn't grow up in a politically active climate. And so this was the first time you had been exposed to that through your college experience. So why don't you just talk a little bit about that? It's in your story, but just maybe expound on that a little bit.
So my family was, we were not like politically active. We didn't attend regular, monthly meetings at the local, Republican or Democrat Party or anything like that. We had never run for office, local elected office, or anything. But I went to college and met one of my college roommates, and her dad was running for Congress down in South Carolina at the time. And so I was like, oh, well, I'll go volunteer.
Congress for the state or Congress for the national?
It's Congress. It's the U.S. Congress for the House, for U.S. House.
Okay.
And so I went down with her a few times and just volunteered. We're literally like standing on the corner of sidewalks, holding signs and, doing phone calls. Pretty like.
So your sign said vote for her dad?
Just different things. So you had car horns going by, like blowing their horns and, cheering you on. So I don't know, it was just really, really interesting, I guess, experience, but also they are a very God-fearing and Christian family. And so be able to really see up close. He was a businessman, had not ever run for office either. But just to see how he was following through on what God's, was leading him to do and his calling, was really, I guess, sort of meaningful and made an impact on me. And to see them walk that out in such a way that was focused on, the Lord and what he was wanting to do through them and through all of them. They have multiple kids in this family, and they were all taking part and, being supportive, but also, being prayerful. And so being a part of that and just kind of on the sidelines was really special. And so that just kind of continued to open up doors along the way. And I just got more involved of my own volition, I came home and I think I volunteered. Elizabeth Dole was running, I think, for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. So I went and volunteered at an event and a rally for her.
Yeah.
So, it just kind of started from that point on, essentially in college.
And so that's, in the story, you talk about you were 8 years with the George W. Bush administration. Is that correct?
About 7 years.
Yeah.
Because I was not up there in 2001. So I went up in 2002.
So that was after the bombings.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't a part of the administration when the bombings happened. So,
correct.
But obviously there was something that somehow or another, I'm assuming that you were involved in just the political thing, the campaign, volunteering. Somehow or another, you got their attention to work for them.
Well, President Bush had come to Charlotte in 2002. I think it was early in 2002, February. And I volunteered with the advance team, they were like, so I showed up one day, and it was just for a couple of days. You volunteered, you kind of commit. But it literally like was escorting like the traveling press corps that comes in on a charter, at the airport, separate from the president. So you're literally there meeting them. You've arranged transportation, the bus, you're on the bus, you're like getting them to the event site, going through security, all those logistics, from the beginning prior to the event to following the event. So I really just I had to attend a couple of different like volunteer meetings at the hotel with the advance team. And once it was all over, that particular trip, and those trips can be from like 4 to 6 days, or depending on the time frame and what's happening at the actual location. But it was only just a couple of days of my time, but I had flexibility in my schedule to do that. And this was after college. I had graduated, so I was in North Carolina working, doing some contract work, and was able to be there. Next thing you know, it turned into I literally at the end of the visit, they were like, "Hey, you did a great job. Would you be interested in doing anything more?" And I was like, "Oh, sure. Here's my email, or here's my phone number. I'll send you, resume, that kind of thing." Not thinking anything would ever come of it. I'll be honest. I was just there to sort of, take it all in. What a neat experience. You get to see the plane, Air Force, all that stuff. Well, and
and it's all volunteer. You don't get paid a dime.
Right. I got paid for nothing on that.
Right.
So just really, took advantage of an opportunity and kind of saw it through, and, worked hard, did my job, and was gracious and respectful. And 2 weeks after that, I think it was just 2 weeks. It was not very long at all. But I remember my mom got a call at the house, and then she tracked me down, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, the vice president's office is calling us. Why are they calling us? You need to call them back. Here's the number." I'm like, "Okay." So I called, and then they were looking for some help on a political trip to Oklahoma, to Tulsa. And when you do that kind of travel, the political travel, you get like a per diem per day, and then they pay for your expenses to get there. But it's not like your own staff, you're not on salary. It's nothing like that.
Yeah.
So I went to Tulsa and joined up.
Were you in college?
No, this is still after college. So that 2002 year. So I had finished, and had that contract work with, a local company in Charlotte, and was able to sort of take some time and, go when I could. And there were times where I couldn't go, and travel and do a trip. But they would call, and, if it worked with my schedule, I would, pick up and go. So you're actually part of the advance team. Then you do site advance, or you're doing press advance, or you're advance lead. And you are literally preparing every aspect with Secret Service and White House communications on preparing for the president's visit, or vice president in this situation, or first lady, or second lady. Any of that. Cabinet secretaries, it was the same, kind of a bit of the same routine.
So then this led to you actually working for, you actually had an office in the.
Yeah. So it led to a full-time job in administration, moved up to DC. And yeah, I had started in the administration, and started with Secretary Rod Page, who was the cabinet secretary for education for the U.S. Department of Education at the time. And then, while you're there, the White House really pulls you on trips for the president. They kind of poach you and take you on doing official business now on trips. And so that just really built up, my skill set and relationships, and good work. It's really a story of, working hard and being, people recognize good work. If you do a good job, people really do pay attention.
Yeah.
And it's not because my parents were big donors, or I was from Texas, or, this is not even part of that equation. It was really just hard work does pay off. And so yeah, it turned into a job, which then led to, I was on the president's campaign in 2004, which led to then a full-time job in the White House as well for the second term. So I had an office in the East Wing, It was a lot of fun. I mean, it was surreal every day to be able to park on East Exec and be able just to walk right on in through gate. It's called Gate A1. And you walk right on in into the White House and into the East Wing every day. And so it was really a great time in my life to be able to have those experiences and to do something like that. Especially like I was in my 20s the whole time. I was, like 22 to 30.
That's amazing.
And so be able to have sort of even that much exposure, that level. I mean, there were a lot of decisions I was making that a lot of people probably in their 20s were not making, in terms of, moving a, president of the United States or the first lady, or, you're negotiating with ambassadors and foreign ministers all over the world. And I was traveling nonstop. So I can't say that, that pace of life is sustainable.
Right.
But I mean, it was a great time in my life to be able to do that. And I do have to, give God really the glory for that, because it was hard. It's not easy, but I just always remained faithful and was just trying to be so faithful to opportunities I felt like, he was putting before me, but also just, embodying, Christ-like qualities and being a light, and in a space where it's so, it can be so divisive and just really mean-spirited. I was very blessed to have worked with the individuals, and with the Bush family, and Andy Card, Anita McBride, she was our chief of staff on the First Lady side. All of those individuals are just really very humble and top notch. And so you build a family almost. It really became a bit of a family, and I still have some of my best friends, we still keep in touch and we get together, and it's because you're going through such intense, experiences really quickly sometimes, that you have to forge and build relationships, that are really tight and trusted, no matter kind of what's going on. So it's challenging, but also super worthwhile.
So I'm interested, is there any like one particularly memorable time for you when you were in that setting, and maybe it was just a time where you just knew? Of course, it's obvious to me hearing your testimony that the Lord's hand had to be on you to get you in those kind of places at such a young age, and I'm really picking up on the fact that you had a servant's heart towards those. You didn't sometimes you picture that kind of atmosphere as being cutthroat or dog eat dog, and it seems like you just adopted the attitude of a servant. But maybe just talk about a time in particular where it stands out to you in your memory as like, this was a highlight of my service in this administration.
Oh wow, that's tough, because there are so many opportunities.
Yeah.
I would say, that some of the biggest highlights for me had to be when I had friends or family that would come in and visit, and to be able to take them, on these sort of behind the scenes, tours and experiences that they would have never otherwise probably had.
Exactly.
Was really, really sweet and very special. So I really kind of took it upon myself to make the most of that, because I felt like, okay, God's given me this opportunity and this platform, or, this space. So I want to share that with as many people as, possible as I can, so that they understand that, anything really is possible. And God can work in really strange and yet wonderful ways. And it's not easy. It's not always easy, and that's a fact. But like my mom and dad came up multiple times, and taking my mom and dad in the Oval Office to meet the president was really, really special. But also my mom got to sing in the White House. Yeah, and so she got to do that several times.
What do you mean sing in the White House?
So at Christmas, you have these Christmas open houses. And so we had our visitors office that would oftentimes bring in a few groups or singers to come in and sing like Christmas carols as guests are walking through the house during Christmas and the decorations. So mom was able to kind of submit a little recording and, all this stuff, and was able, and so, we were able to, yeah, that happened it happened, I think 2 or 3 times, but she brought like, she would have someone coming and accompanying her like differently every time too, just to really give somebody else even that opportunity and that exposure.
Wow.
So those were really, I mean, just really wonderful moments. I mean, I have a nephew at the time. Barney, the dog, had like a birthday party at the house. It was really kind of last minute and comical. But I was able to get my nephew, just outside of the garden and,
Wow.
meet the president and meet the first lady and get to play with the dog and you're on the grounds of the White House. So those are just things that, I mean, do not happen, on the Ingleside Farm Road in North Carolina where I grew up. But
So,
I would say, the travel that I got to do for me personally, and it was really, really spectacular. Be able to see, I mean, just different cultures. I love traveling to the Middle East. I was, I planned a secret trip for for Mrs. Bush at the time to Afghanistan.
wow.
And yeah, so that was really, really super. It was really hard, but incredible. And also like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and I mean Jordan and Israel, just so many different opportunities to sort of navigate different systems of government. And so you're learning, but also as a woman, it's also tricky in those countries at the time too. So to be able to stand there next to, some men in Saudi Arabia where the women weren't even allowed to drive or, was really, empowering almost, and really made me really want to like encourage other women to, just the principles of freedom and being able to kind of stand up and have a voice, and democracy really belongs to, all people essentially, wherever, where you operate and where your government is structured that way. So, I mean, I've been to the Olympics, spring and summer.
Wow.
So that was really special too, just to see the amount of, the American spirit and the pride in our athletes. And so, yeah. And then, I mean, you have special moments with the president or Mrs. Bush behind closed doors where, I mean, they are super genuine people, and they are, I mean, the president especially, I would say, is a little bit more emotional. So
Really?
it was not unusual to see him, shed tears. And especially when he's meeting with, families of soldiers who have died, protecting our freedoms. And so there's nothing pretentious or insincere in him and her in those moments. It's just what you see when you saw them on television. I mean, it is what you get. I mean, they're both very smart, very brilliant people.
Yeah.
So it was so many. Gosh, I could probably write a book about some.
You could. Maybe you will one day.
Maybe.
When you get some spare time, right?
Exactly.
Well, so then when you're doing all that, it sounds like once you got out of that, it wasn't like you said, I want to run for office someday. In fact, it may have had an opposite effect. I don't know, when you saw you mentioned seeing mean spiritedness and all of that. So talk to me a little bit about how that came about, and maybe remind us a little bit more about, I was thinking about it, the timetable of when you became a senator and other details.
Yeah.
It'd be cool for our readership to know about that.
So, I mean, I left DC. My last day in the White House was the president's last day in the White House and Mrs. Bush in 2009. And, kind of tried to take a little downtime to figure out what I wanted to do next. I really needed a break. I mean, I was pretty spent. I was pretty burnt out.
Yeah.
And I had been asked to consider, Texas, but was really eager to come home to North Carolina. And so I made the decision to come home. And it's funny, I talk about this, but I mean, literally I left the White House and even went back to mom and dad's house.
Yeah. I laughed when I read that. I said, wow, what a contrast.
So, I mean, we joke about that too. And, but I mean, I wanted to be near my family, and I wanted to kind of sort through what I felt like was next. And again, got open doors and was able to connect with the Graham family, and got asked to come up and kind of talk to them and speak to them even about my experiences and the skill set that I could bring to the table. So I came up and actually I moved to town and began working at Samaritan's Purse. I had no desire to like really kind of dive into any sort of political space. I wanted, like I said, just time away and a break, and you know, kind of get my bearings and enjoy a more civilized pace of life.
Yeah.
And so my family still kind of kids me that, you know, I went from one family dynasty to another, from the Bushes to the Grahams, and but I always remind them that I'm the most proudest and privileged to be their daughter. So I think that's kind of just really where I'm rooted, and central to kind of who I am too. And, you know, where I grew up is just a huge part of that.
Yeah. That
But
comes across.
yeah, and so I got asked to consider running several years later, back in, I guess it was 2015, towards the end of 15,
Okay.
when timing was kind of close at hand on filing for office. So I guess, you know, I had people that had asked me about it before, but I was like, no way. Like, I am behind the scenes. I can get things done. I know how to get things done. I can get, you know, I was not wanting to be the public face and the one out front. And I can kind of survey the land a little bit better when I'm kind of behind the scenes and understand everything that's at play. But really, really, really prayed about it. And God had just kind of been working. And the same thing that was happening kind of when this was going on was Franklin was preparing for his Decision America tour in 2016, where he traveled to every, you know, state capital, encouraging people to vote, to pray, to engage, which meant like running for elected office if needed and are called to. And so I kind of went to him and said, hey, I think I'm feeling called to led to run for office. Will you pray about this for me and with me? And you know, he was like, no, you know, I meant everybody else but you.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking if I was sitting here, she's, no, I really don't think you should do that, Deanna, but I'm sure he was.
He's like, you know, like, why would you want to do that? No. So, I mean, it was really, really sweet and gracious time, you know, to kind of share that with him. It's funny. I mean, I'm not married. I don't have kids. So it's a little comical to me that the one person I had to really kind of go and talk to about any of this was, you know, my boss, Franklin.
Right.
So, you know, but really just continue to pray about it. I mean, I talk about this in the interview too, and the article is really, you know, God used Gideon and Nehemiah. And I mean, it was so clear. I mean, it's funny that he used more of the Old Testament than even the New Testament, but that's true. Really, you know, and in Gideon's story, just really reminding me, you know, I am with you, almighty man of valor. And then he told him not once, but twice, like, surely I am with you. So I had this promise that I latched onto.
Yeah, plus Gideon was kind of like, you talking to me?
Right.
Not me. I mean, yeah.
Right. And, you know, he had limited resources. I mean, God kept, you know, shrinking his army.
Yeah.
And so here I am, like, you know, really a no name. I'm not engaged locally, politically, really. So it became, are you sure? Like, really, I'm supposed to do this? But I mean, God was just working, and you know, just continually started even open up pathways and opportunities and folks to meet. I had 2.5 months to run. I had a primary opponent that year. And that was when the election was in March in 2016, and I had a primary opponent. So I had 2.5 months to really work about 5 counties to get my name out there, to introduce myself. And that's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of territory to cover. So I was able to pull through and successfully won that primary, and you know, the rest is still going.
Yeah. Well, in your story, you talked about, or just the need for people to be reasonable, approachable, and honest in the kind of position that you're in. That's how important that is. But I want to quote something you said from the article. This is for those who haven't read the article yet or looking at this. Deanna mentioned the need for people to, and this just everybody, not just politicians, but I think it's particularly important, those in the political arena. And this is what you said: to approach conversations with less predetermined conclusions about what people are going to say or think, and to be intentional in building community. You can be truthful, firm, and also gentle in your speech, as well as loving. And so I think I could speak for everybody to say it doesn't seem like on the national level that it just seems like there's not that kind of, it seems like we're becoming more and more polarized. So I want to know your perspective on what about that. And, I'm concerned that, this whole thing about protecting our freedoms, that, we can destroy ourselves from within. And so just talk to me about your perspective on all that. Now that you're in the political arena, you're having those discussions in Raleigh, and you probably have a very unique perspective on what's happened in the nation because of where you've been. So just maybe share your thoughts about perspective on that and that.
I think I always I'm always looking and eager for truth. So I will have a tendency to survey, conversations or the news or articles, really, trying to piece out kind of what I feel like is, okay, what's the truth behind or in between the lines here? And how do I really, understand what is happening? Because there's a lot of noise. That's one thing I'll say. I think there's a lot of noise out there. And I think it's a lot of heightened emotions. And I think if we all just sort of really, I think it's important to stand up and to speak up. But I think, there's also sort of, thinking about the timing of it and when you do that and the tone in which you do that, all really does make a difference in the conversation. I think, I have many faults, I have many weaknesses, and this has not always been something that's easy for me either. But I do think in recent years, it has really sharpened this ability, to speak pointedly, but yet also, with sincerity and even a graciousness at the same time. I think we have to be more intentional with that attitude as opposed to sort of latching on to whatever emotion or feeling or soundbite that we're hearing, whether it's on social media or whether it's on the news or the radio or what my neighbor told me, or, we really just need to be thinking for ourselves and, staying true to our convictions and our principles. And sometimes that does require a fight. And so I think understanding when to do that and knowing how to do that well, is really, it's just, there's a silver lining in there in terms of like how that can be done. It just takes a little time, and it takes time. It takes time to build relationships. And I do think that's kind of the root of it, is really being intentional and sitting down with someone and being open to kind of what they're going to say or respond or how they're going to respond. But yet continuing to sort of either communicate your truth and your perspective or God's truth. Can be like, it's not just politics or, there's just other kind of conversations that take place, from relationships and being able to handle, opposing views, or even how to handle different situations in the workplace. It's really not about, always being so combative or attacking out of the gate, but really being receptive and open to kind of what they have to say, but then also coming up with some sort of solution too. It's funny. I've had people blast me on social media or, send me nasty emails or yell at me on the phone. And so there are moments where, I really do just kind of stop and just let them get out whatever it is they need to get out. Because I know this person has sometimes like no clue who I am or like meaning who I am as an individual, like, or it has nothing to do with me necessarily, but it is something much bigger than that. And it's, so sometimes, I just end up kind of letting things, knowing what to kind of take to heart and what to sort of, navigate and how to navigate it, is part of what I do too, I guess. I think, I've had examples of, I was going to share this when, I get nasty emails. Sometimes I'll respond back with, hey, would you like to meet for coffee?
I love that.
Totally throws them off.
Yeah.
For a loop, And then they're like, they pause and then they'll respond. And then I will respond with dates, times, let's meet, like, like that kind of thing. And then we meet, and then it turns into like a really great conversation, when we meet face to face.
I love that.
And so it's funny because there isn't a couple instances where this has happened. This individual like now will send me texts and like tell me have an awesome day, or hey, I have a quick question, can you give me a call? Or and it's not nearly coming at me with the tone or the attack or the bullet points that they're wanting to hit me with. So I just think that's where, oh man, you have to be willing to have a hard conversation. And if it's about politics or if it's about your faith and sharing your faith and your testimony, and knowing how to do that, God will give you kind of the timing and the attitude, I believe, to do that. And it's through a lot of prayer, but also just, really being just abiding in him and really living out or living in Christ. That as Christians, we can talk about doing Christian things and going to church and praying and volunteering, but sometimes it's at the expense of actually living in Christ. We do Christian things, but we don't live and abide in him. And I think that can make all the difference in the world. It's funny. I had a guy who actually drew these political cartoons of me, like 3 or 4 of them. And I actually sent him a letter in the mail. I tracked him down, sent him a letter, and was like, hey, I just wanted to say that I think, your artwork's great. I enjoy getting a kick out of it, really just fun and blah, blah, blah. He responded back to me. He sent me a letter, and he was just kind of like, well, now I just don't know how I'm going to be mean to you. Like how, I don't know how this is going to work. Cause he was just like, they were mean-spirited political cartoons. He was like, you're kind of nice. I like you now. Like, I can't. And so sure enough, the next political cartoon he did was actually a really nice one. And I'm like, oh man, this isn't.
Kill him with kindness, right?
It was really kind of, it is funny how you approach things in the right spirit. And the tone and the spirit of the conversation or relationship changes. And that's true for anyone. That's not just for me as a senator and working with constituents, but in friendships and family and in your church family. So, just being good neighbors.
I love that relational dynamic you brought there, because I've seen people that I know and love on, who come from opposite perspectives, who act completely different on social media than they would ever do in person. And it grieves me to see that. And so I don't engage much in those when that kind of vitriol enters into Facebook or Instagram. I don't involve myself much at all with that. But I will, if I know the person and I feel like, hey, this is something that needs to be talked about, I'll reach out to them and talk to them. And I think that, what you're talking about, it's very hard if somebody punches you in the face not to want to punch them back. That's our human nature. So really what you're talking about is having the fruit of the spirit of self-control, taking a few deep breaths, being quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. And those things are in our own strength, they're not possible. So I appreciate
That's true.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that, I was even really good at years ago either. It's a refining that the Lord continues to do and to work in me. And so I want to be open to that too, so that he can use me, for his purposes.
Yeah. So don't let your heart get hard being in that arena. Above all
that
else,
is true.
Guard your heart, because out of the heart of the issues of life. And I know that, just working with people in my ministry that I've had before I got into this, and now I think one of my biggest concerns is that, Jesus talked about because in the last days, because iniquity would abound, the hearts of many people would grow cold. And one of my big prayers, Lord, don't let my heart get hard. Don't let my love grow cold. Let my love flow towards you and towards others remain intact. And sometimes I can tell when that's not happening, when my love flows get blocked, either because I'm angry here with how people are doing, then it affects everything. And so
Right.
I noticed in your story, you talked about how important it was to get time with your hectic schedule, to get time, make sure you carved out time to be alone with God. So maybe we can conclude our time today just by talking about that, because I think that's essential to anybody that's going to serve other people, to find their strength in God. So talk about
Sure.
how you've made that a priority. And
It's really kind of how I start my day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's every day. I mean, I will get up. I love the quiet of the morning before the hecticness and the busyness of my day.
Yeah.
And then, during COVID, I think a lot of things, I became really intentional about, I mean, even creating, like, throughout the day, I kept a notebook during COVID, and I sometimes still do this, but kept a notebook out and would really create a, like, I'm thankful for list. And it would pop into my head, if it was even, I don't know, a delivery, or, I mean, little things too, but I would write them down. And I was always try to practice a bit of a grateful spirit and a thankful heart. And, I mean, really be deliberate in that. And so I really do try to start the day in an attitude of just really surrender and just sweet, intimate fellowship and time with the Lord, which was really also listening, which we often get really busy about talking and not really listening. And so get up early and just build in time to really meditate and to, just soak in kind of his truths and encouragement to get me through that day. And then really, I love to be mindful throughout the day. And I think that's something that's hard for a lot of people too, but going back to, like, oh, what did my morning tell me? What did he talk to me about this morning? And how is that? Oh, look at what he just did, and it was like, this happened yesterday, and I was really praying about something yesterday morning, and, about 3:00, oh, wow, I was surprised. And, I act surprised, and I shouldn't be surprised. I should be praying with, expectation that it's going to be answered. And it was answered. And so, I mean, I just really believe in the power of prayer. I mean, I often feel isolated. My role can be very isolating, and it can be lonely. So I really do probably spend a lot of time talking with the Lord. And in the car, I listen to a lot of sermons. Sometimes I listen to nothing because I like a little quiet after being with folks a lot too. So, I mean, that's just, I pray with individuals. I mean, I have a really solid group of folks that are always willing just to pick up the phone and say, hey, let me pray for you. You're driving, let me pray over you. So I think that is really, really critical. And I think if we did that more as individuals with one another and less hesitant, I mean, people would just, be surprised at kind of how, when a market leaves, how the Lord works through it and encourages someone in a matter of 2 minutes, just because you picked up the phone and said, hey, I'm going to cover you right now. So.
Well, nobody understands us like Jesus understands us, and he knows us better than we know ourselves. And to have that source is, I mean, we're just blessed to know.
We are blessed.
Yeah. And I hearkening back to what you're talking about carving out that time. It's always early on in my Christian walk, that was something that I needed help with, and God helped me with. And, I still tell people to this day, I don't do that every day because I'm so spiritual. I do it because I'm desperately needy.
Mm-hmm.
I do it because I'm not. And I know without his grace, I can just, react to people. Yeah, I need that. I need the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience. It's not something I can make happen in myself. I got to have it. You mentioned it earlier about it comes from abiding in him. So I'm so happy to get to know you better through this process, and I'm happy that you're serving. And
well, thank you.
And I know you're going to keep serving, whether you're serving in politics or whatever. But keep your heart soft and look forward to seeing what the Lord's going to do for you, in you and through you in the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
God bless.
God bless you.